Hi there, it's Timothy Linsdau. I'm a video producer and a Christian, and big news happened today 50 years ago.
Hi, my name's Aaron Linsdau. I'm a polar explorer and motivational speaker. Today we're going to talk about the amazing photo of the first Earthrise ever photographed by the Apollo 8 team.
What do you think of that? Just think about that. 50 years ago on Christmas Eve was the first filmed Earthrise.
1968. So let's check this out. We'll put this right in front of the camera. Yeah, check that out. That photo had never been taken. It's such a common thing. People say, oh yeah, what's the big deal? But back then with JFK's inspiring vision of put a man on the moon by the end of this decade, right? I don't quite have that Massachusetts speak down, but now my dad here, this is my dad, and he was alive back then, and he doesn't remember this, but he does remember the moon landing. Where were you in the moon landing?
Okay, well, I remember seeing the Earthrise photos on magazines. You know, that was a big deal. But that following year in July was the first moon landing when Armstrong and Aldrin stepped foot on the moon. So that was a huge year. But also remember, 1968 was the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. And that just gives you an idea how crazy a time it was in America. All these things that we were doing at the same time. Can you imagine fighting a near full-scale war and going to the moon? Of course, the space race, other than the idea of being there, was a big deal because it was the Cold War, and we wanted to get there before the Russians, and that was an important thing to do.
So one of the interesting stories was these three men. Here, we'll show the picture, right? These three men. It was Bill Anders, Jim Lovell, and Frank Borman were the first humans to look at the Earth from the moon. And interestingly, let's see, they've got the lunar lander module where they tested out all the equipment, and the Saturn V launcher, the most powerful machine ever made up to that point, were all instrumental. But one of the stories that I read about those guys zooming around the moon is that NASA in the run-up to the Apollo 11 landing mission was that they said, hey, we got to make sure not to put enough fuel in the lander, because when those guys are going around the moon, they might actually try and land it and say, oh, something's wrong, we got to land, first man on the moon. Well, honestly, I think I would have tried it too. So they told them, you land, you will not be coming home. So it was pretty interesting. This photograph, let's see, it was Anders. He was on the photography job, and he had a Hasselblad, but he didn't have a light meter. So this famous photo, they had no clue, like, how do you photograph the Earth with the moon? So what he did is he took his camera and just started shooting and adjusting f-stops and blasting it away, and they think it said on the 6th frame they got the shot. And this is probably one of the most iconic shots, because have you ever heard of the pale blue dot? Do you remember that pale blue dot, the little Earth?
Oh, yeah.
Earth? Now, what was that all about at the time?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, I mean, it really started like the Earth Day movement and the environmentalism movement.
Well, I think it relates to the solar system. And we were basically just a pale blue dot in the sky if you were far enough away. But
yeah, I mean,
you have an answer?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was part of that envisioning of, the Earth is really powerful, and you don't want to go crazy, but they realized as they were circling around the moon and coming back around, this tiny speck is all we've got. Like, hey, let's go live on the moon and breathe what? Space? Hey, let's go live on Venus. I hear the acid rain and 900-degree temperatures are comfy this year. Do you have your 900-degree suit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not an environmentalism thing or a left-right thing. It's just like, whatever we do and we have different perspectives, it's just an inspiring thing to say, like, it's not we're in it together, blah, blah, blah. But, like, look, we got to be a little more careful with each other and help each other out. Not to say, there's plenty of political turmoil now. I would say there was much more back in the 60s.
Yeah, you think of what was going on in college campuses, the rioting, students were killed, and just Vietnam in itself, and the Cold War, all those things going on at the same time was tremendous confusion for everybody. That was only much more than 23 years after World War II, and it was very fresh, that war, in a lot of people's minds. So it colored their view and their thinking of the Vietnam War, that this was their kids' war.
Yeah.
But it was a completely different war.
So I'm going to read part of the article, and talks about what they tried to figure out to say with Anders reading the script. And NASA told him, look, you're going to be going around the moon on Christmas Eve. Think of something to say, and don't be silly. This is kind of serious. So they debated what to say with the first moonrise and the first humans and object going around the moon. So during a live broadcast from television, they turned to the Bible and began reading from Genesis.
Yes. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep.
And then they said, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light. And there was light, and God saw the light, and that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness.
And Lovell read next, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters.
And then the quote goes on. And then they continued to read this live over the air because, what's the most impactful statement you can speak about creation? This is still it. And he said, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, which means the horizon. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And then Borman said,
And God said, gotta get this right, and the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good.
Okay, let's see, where are we? So it was good. And Borman added, and from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with a good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth. And Anders and all these guys remember this all very clearly, but the way they describe it, it wasn't like this dramatic moment. They said it was, these guys were engineers, technicians, and scientists. They weren't Shakespearean dramatists. They were the deep voice. But they said NASA couldn't pull this off today because, you'd forbid reading the Bible ever because, if nothing else, it's a historical book. But, Congress looking over shoulders, scratch their ear, we got to review everything. Really, these few moments, they actually decided, really not decided, but figured out, what are we going to say? And just like when the national director talked about what they're going to say when Neil Armstrong steps on the moon. Like, Neil, make it profound, but don't go too crazy, would you? So actually, he stressed about that. I listened to the First Man book, the whole book, not just the movie. But he really stressed about this. And these guys like, what do we say to the planet? Because how many people were watching these events?
Oh, yeah, as many as could. I mean, it was not only televisions at home, but they had, screens up, and it was an amazing event.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly spectacular to launch that massive vehicle. I've been to Huntsville where they have the Saturn V rocket, and also to the Space Coast in Orlando, and you stand under that thing like, that took off the ground and went to the moon 250,000 miles away. I mean, when you first heard that, what did you think? Like, hey, we're going to go to the moon. What did you think as a kid?
Well, I think by that time you were getting used to so many things moving so quickly. You looked at the U.S. as I guess it was kind of the Kennedy legacy that we could do anything if we put our minds to it, and maybe that's the case today. We could come together. But this is an appropriate time. Christmas Eve, here we are, 50 years later from that event.
Yeah.
I remember the moon landing, and I remember right where I was, and there was a full moon at the same time. During the day, you could see it. And I remember looking at it and thinking, wow, somebody just stepped on the surface of that moon.
And it's interesting, I think either today or within a few days, it's actually been a full moon too. So it's neat to have that kind of cycle around and have that. So here's Bill Anders photos again on December 24th, 1968. Let me stand up here. There we go. Pretty spectacular. It's not something you take for granted, because still space is incredibly dangerous. We've lost the Challenger and the astronauts there. We lost the Columbia and the astronauts. We lost the astronauts in the Apollo. Which fire was it? Apollo. Oh, sorry. Sorry, guys.
10. Sorry.
Yeah. We lost them. 3 astronauts in the Apollo test launch. So it's a dangerous place. People have sadly lost their lives. So never think that, what's a big deal? It's a big deal. It really is. So just from us, my name's Aaron Linsdau. And
I'm Tim Linsdau.
And we wish you a very Merry Christmas and Christmas Eve. And we pray for our country and the world that maybe things smooth out in the coming year. Who knows? You never know what God will bring you.
Yes, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, and please like and comment on the video below. Subscribe to our channel. Please support us on PayPal, Venmo, and Patreon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.